Imagine a world where digital photography was invented, but the company that brought it to life actively tried to bury it. A world where innovation was stifled not by competition, but by fear from within. That's not a dystopian novel, that's the true story of Kodak, the undisputed king of photography and its epic, self-inflicted downfall. What if the very company poised to dominate the next technological revolution chose instead to commit corporate suicide? To understand this perplexing mystery, we need to rewind to 1975, a pivotal year in the history of technology, and perhaps the beginning of the end for Kodak. For decades, Kodak wasn't just a company, it was synonymous with photography. Kodak moment was a phrase ingrained in popular culture. They dominated the film market, a behemoth with 90% of film sales and 85% of camera sales in the US, printing countless memories for families worldwide. Their yellow boxes were iconic, their brand indestructible. They had perfected the art of making money from chemical photographic processes. The film, the paper, the chemicals, the developing services. It was a well-oiled, highly profitable machine generating billions. But deep within their corporate labs, an unassuming electrical engineer named Stephen Sasson was quietly building something that had the potential to dismantle that entire empire. Sasson, with his team, was given a seemingly simple task. Could an image be captured electronically? Using a Frankensteinian contraption made from a Super 8 film camera lens, a few digital circuit boards, a portable cassette recorder, and 16 nickel-cadmium batteries, he created the world's first self-contained digital camera. It weighed a mighty 8 pounds, took 23 seconds to capture a single 0.01 megapixel black and white image, and another 23 seconds to process it onto a tiny TV screen. It was crude, slow, and low resolution, yet it worked. Sasson presented his invention to his superiors, cautiously optimistic. The response he received was not what you might expect from a company that prides itself on innovation. They told him, "That's cute, but don't tell anyone about it." The fear was palpable. This new technology, revolutionary as it was, carried a terrifying price. It didn't use film. And film for Kodak was everything. They were a company built on a single, unwavering premise: chemical photography. The idea of a camera that would render film obsolete was an existential threat, a dark premonition of their own demise. They had invented the future, and their first instinct was to bury it. This single, fateful decision ignited a chain reaction of strategic blunders that, over the next 2 decades, would systematically dismantle the once unshakable photographic giant. While Sasson's invention sat largely unexplored, hushed away in corporate archives, other companies, sensing the shifting winds, began to dabble. Sony introduced the Mavica in 1981, a still video camera that recorded images onto a floppy disk. It wasn't truly digital, but it signaled a direction. Canon, Nikon, and later even Apple began experimenting with digital imaging. Kodak, meanwhile, was paralyzed by what management guru Clayton Christensen famously termed the innovator's dilemma. Their highly profitable traditional business blinded them to the disruptive potential of their own invention. They clung to the film business, pouring resources into improving chemical processes, even as consumer behavior began to subtly, almost imperceptibly, shift. Their initial strategy was to ignore digital altogether, hoping it was a fad. When that became untenable, they tried to integrate it, but hesitantly, almost reluctantly. They developed some early digital cameras, like the DCS line in the early 90s, but these were prohibitively expensive, targeting professionals rather than the mass market. Crucially, they made them compatible with Nikon and Canon lenses, an admission that other companies were already leading in camera hardware. Instead of leveraging their vast consumer trust and distribution network to push digital, they viewed it as a necessary evil, a supplement to their lucrative film business. They saw digital as a means to print more pictures, not as a replacement for film. The internal culture fostered a deep-seated resistance to change. Employees who championed digital were often sidelined, their ideas met with skepticism and even hostility. The chemical engineering departments, the heart of Kodak's empire, held sway, and they saw no future in pixels, only in silver halides. It was an organizational inertia of epic proportions, a Titanic-sized company trying to turn on a dime. Adding another layer to this corporate tragedy was Kodak's eventual entry into the digital camera market, but in the most half-hearted way imaginable. They were consistently late to the party, their products often inferior, and their marketing confused. By the time they fully committed to digital, companies like Sony, Canon, and Nikon had not only caught up, but far surpassed them. These agile competitors didn't have a legacy film business to protect. They embraced digital with open arms, iterating rapidly, dropping prices, and developing user-friendly interfaces. Kodak's digital cameras, when they did arrive, were often clunky, overpriced, and lacked features that consumers were already demanding. Furthermore, Kodak failed to recognize the critical shift in the digital workflow. People weren't just taking pictures, they were sharing them instantly. They needed easy connections, computer integration, and eventually online platforms. Kodak, historically focused on printing, couldn't adapt to this new paradigm of instant gratification and digital sharing. They saw printing as the value proposition, while the world was moving towards screen-based consumption and sharing. What they discovered next changed everything, not for Kodak, but for the rest of the world. The rise of camera phones, starting in the early 2000s, was the final nail in Kodak's coffin. Suddenly, everyone had a digital camera in their pocket, instantly connected to the internet. The entire concept of a standalone digital camera, let alone film, became obsolete for the casual user almost overnight. Kodak, still trying to make a premium on high-resolution digital cameras and printing services, was utterly unprepared for this mobile revolution. Their core business, once their greatest strength, became their undeniable weakness. They were so busy protecting their past that they completely missed the future unfolding before their very eyes. They divested, sold off patents, laid off thousands, and tried desperately to pivot into printing services and even pharmaceuticals, anything to stay afloat. But the damage was done. The brand that once defined photography found itself bleeding cash, losing relevance, and shrinking at an alarming rate. It was a slow, agonizing death for a company that had once held the world in its lens. On January 19, 2012, the unthinkable happened. Eastman Kodak Company, the 130-year-old titan of industry, filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. It was a shocking moment, a stark warning to established businesses everywhere about the perils of complacency and the critical importance of embracing disruptive innovation from within. The irony was almost Shakespearean. The company that invented the technology that rendered its core business obsolete was ultimately brought down by its own fear of cannibalization. To this day, the story of Kodak serves as a haunting corporate cautionary tale. It's a testament to how even the most dominant companies can fall if they fail to adapt, if they prioritize legacy revenue streams over future potential, and if they let internal fear triumph over inevitable progress. We may never know the full extent of the innovations that were stifled at Kodak, or how much more quickly digital photography could have evolved had they fully embraced their own invention. But one thing is clear: the company that showed the world how to capture moments for eternity ultimately failed to capture its own future. If you want more mysteries of corporate downfall, the next video explores the rise and fall of Blockbuster in the age of streaming.